Hi, I'm Jen from That Mama Book Nook, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a nighttime shoot, not necessarily intentionally. I am a stay-at-home mom to 3 kiddos who are home for the summer. They are all done with school, so I am going to do my best to still film most of my videos in the daytime, but my guess is this will not be the last nighttime video. Just mom life. It's also day 3 of a heat wave here, so I have the fan going, I hear a thunderstorm starting, so just doing the best I can here. Today I am going to be filming my mid-year freakout tag. I am excited to share about some of the books that I have been reading for this first half of the year, especially because I only just started on BookTube this month. So this will be a chance for me to share with you all what I've read so far. This year, I think I've read a total of about 44 books so far, which is awesome. I think that's about how much I read total last year, because I basically started picking up reading again halfway through the year, so that kind of makes sense. I am, on track to basically double what I read last year. The first question is, what has been your favorite book that you have read so far in 2024? So for me, my favorite book that I have read is The Women by Kristen Hanna. I am a huge Kristen Hanna fan. I love historical fiction. It's definitely my favorite genre. Kristen Hanna especially is just an auto-buy author for me. I am hoping to go through more of her backlog as well soon, but definitely all of the books that I have read from her have been a 5-star read. The Women in particular follows Frances, or Frankie McGrath, in the mid-1960s. She's a nursing student. She lives with her very conservative and overprotective parents and her brother in the mid-1960s. So this is during the Vietnam War time. Her brother enlists. Her father has this whole room that is dedicated to heroes, which is really men in their family who've been in the military. And Frankie wants to be a hero too. So she decides to enlist as well to go into the Army Nursing Corps. She goes over to Vietnam. She is very young, very new, has no idea what she's doing, but very quickly, definitely a sink or swim situation, and she becomes a very skilled nurse. She deals with obviously a lot of trauma over there, but she does survive the war, which might not be what we can say for everyone. A good chunk of the book was actually about her coming home and having to deal with the trauma at home. The Vietnam War was very divided in America. There's a lot of angry protesters, and even the people who are other veterans who she thinks will be supportive of her are not. They really gaslight her and say women weren't in the Vietnam War, or if they were, they didn't see anything. So she has to deal with a lot of stuff, both in Vietnam and when she comes home. And this book just shines a light on a lot of the stuff that happened during that time. I have not read a Vietnam War book before. I've read a lot of World War II, some of World War I, but not Vietnam. So this was really interesting. It makes me want to pick up more. I cried, which I mentioned, that's like pretty much automatic 5-star read for me if I cry during a book. It is a great coming of age. There's a great found family, especially with like the other nurses there. I have a nursing background as well, not in the military, but I liked that connection. And it's a book about hope. It's a book about loss. It was just really great. I definitely encourage anyone to pick this one up. I think it will be really hard to top that even for the rest of 2024, but time will tell. The next question is, what is the best sequel you've read in 2024? I have actually not read too many sequels. I am starting several series, so in the second half of the year I might have different answers for this one. That being said, I have been reading the Magnolia Falls series by Laura Pavlov. I have finished the third book in the series. The first book was Loving Romeo, which followed Romeo and Demi. The second book was Wild River, which followed River and Ruby. And then the third book, which I just read this past month, was Forbidden King, which followed Kingston and Sailor. I have definitely talked about this book in previous videos because it was on my June TBR and it was a June new release. But this whole series follows this band of 5 best guy friends, definitely like a band of brothers type situations. There is also Nash, which will be the next book, and Hayes, which will be the last book, I believe. They live in the small town of Magnolia Falls, so it's a small town romance series, but you really, really fall in love with these guys. But Forbidden King has definitely been my favorite sequel that I've read so far. As I mentioned, this follows Kingston and Sailor. Kingston and Sailor have been friends since they were kids. They've both lived in the town for a while, and at one point Sailor was going through a really hard time family-wise, and so Kingston's family actually took her in for a little bit. So they've always had this really strong connection going through hard times. Now they are adults. Sailor has moved back home. Kingston has a construction business. Sailor is opening up a new romance bookstore, and their connection being in such close proximity to each other is just undeniable at this point. But Kingston is feeling a lot of struggles because sisters are off limits within the best friend group. So that's tricky for him, but Sailor is kind of like, I'm an adult, I'm a woman, like I can make my own decisions, I don't need my brother's approval. So there's a little bit of a forbidden love, best friend's sister or brother's best friend. Kingston and Sailor are just both really, really sweet people, such big hearts, and it was a really fun read. The next question is, what new releases do you want to read but haven't yet? This book came out on March 5th, and that is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. I do not know what Kennedy Ryan puts in her books, but I eat them up. I love her writing so much. I really, really want to get to this book, and I've heard nothing but good things about this. It is highly rated on Goodreads. Any of my friends that have reviewed it have given it high praise, and I really can't wait to get to it. I believe this is about a woman whose husband gets taken away, maybe by FBI, like I think he did something shady, and she's left to raise her daughters by herself. But then in enters this man who seems like maybe there's some history there. I'm not 100% sure, but there's definitely a connection, but there's more of a complicated story, more of a, it's strong women characters, lots of background to it. There's more to the plot than just the romance, and those are some of my favorite books. I like complex characters and plots. Another new release that came out in March is Sleeping Giants by Renee Denfeld. This book was actually given to me by the publisher, HarperCollins. This was actually the first book that was ever sent to me without me requesting it from a publisher, so I am really excited to get to it. I actually should be getting to it pretty soon, coming up in my TBR. This book, I think, starts off with finding out that a boy probably drowns in foster care, and then we flash forward 20 years later, and his sister is just finding out that she even had a brother who was thought to have drowned. His body was never found, and she was also orphaned. She's kind of a loner. She works at the zoo. Her only friend is a polar bear, and she really just wants to find out what happened to her brother, more history about her biological family. She ends up teaming up with a police officer who is a widower and doesn't have a lot going on, and they kind of uncover all these horrible truths about stuff that happened. So this one also sounds really good. I'm obsessed with this cover and the colors are amazing. I am really excited to read this one. One other new release that just came out on June 4th, The Last 12 Miles by Erica Roebuck. I definitely talked about this one in my June newer releases, but just briefly, this is the historical fiction that follows the two women. One is a rum runner and one is on the side of the law trying to stop rum runners, and takes place during the 1920s, and that one just sounded really good, really caught my eye. This one was the one that was based on a true story about these women, so that is always something that definitely catches my eye. The next question is, what is the most anticipated new release for the second half of the year? August is going to apparently be a huge month for me. As I was looking into this question and pulling up all the new releases that I've kind of marked, I realized that most of them come out in August. So that will be a heavy reading month for me, or shortly after. The first book I have already purchased a signed copy of, and I actually received an e-arc of, so I'm super excited, and that is Behind Every Good Man by Sarah Goodman Confino. This is also historical fiction, surprise, surprise at this point. This also takes place in I think the early 1960s, and it follows a woman she catches her husband having an affair with a secretary. Her husband is running for some political party, and she decides to help the opposing person. I believe a romance develops between them, but that one sounds so good, and there's like a tiny little bit of connection to one of her other books, Don't Forget to Write, which was a very favorite of mine from last year. So I am so excited to get that connection a little bit again and be back in this world, but also I'm just obsessed with her writing and I can't wait to read this one. The next new release that's also coming out in August is By Any Other Name by Jodi Picoult. I'm a big Jodi Picoult fan. Jodi Picoult doesn't always write historical fiction, but this one actually does happen to be a dual timeline with a historical piece and a present day piece. So this is following one woman in the 1500s who is a playwright, and obviously women at that time were not respected in many professions, but certainly not writing. So she finds a way to get her play on the stage. And then flash forward to the present, and we are following one of her now present day relatives, and while not quite as difficult from hundreds of years ago, still the playing field for women is not the same. So we are kind of comparing the struggles of both of these women. I feel like there's a theme. I really like books with strong female characters, as well as like if there's a historical piece, that's just all the better. Then another one that is coming out in August, this is actually an indie book. It is the third book in the Cliff Haven series. I randomly requested an arc of the second book. I didn't realize it was the second book at the time, but they're definitely standalones. You can read them separately and out of order, but I absolutely loved it. This is by Eve Blakely, and so the third book is called The Version You Hide. This one is following Mackenzie and Dylan. It's a reverse Grumpy Sunshine. So Mackenzie is grumpy, pessimistic, she's had a tough life, and then Dylan is just the warm cinnamon roll guy. It is a romance, another small town. I'm really excited. I was really impressed with the second book, and I am excited to read the third one. I read both Spice and Closed Door, but just for anyone who is interested in a Closed Door series, this Cliff Haven series is Closed Door romance. Last book that's coming out in August is The Apprentice to the Villain. So the second book in The Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I actually don't know a lot about the plot other than I believe we're just continuing where the first book left off. I know the first book gets some, not controversial, but people either love it or hate it, it seems. I was on the love it camp. I feel like if you know what you're getting into when you go into it, it's so enjoyable. It is a cozy fantasy for sure. Do not expect high fantasy, but it is funny. I love the idea of this whole HR system within the fantasy world. I just really got a kick out of it, and I'm excited to see the slow burn romance hopefully develop even more so between the villain and his assistant in the second book. Then the last new release that I'm going to talk about, I promise, comes out in September. So a little bit of a break, but not much. I am a big Liane Moriarty fan. I am kind of going through her backlog as we speak. I am currently reading What Alice Forgot. I read The Husband's Secret a long time ago. I read Apples Never Fall last year. I read 9 Perfect Strangers earlier this year. I actually am planning to read Big Little Lies later this year. And I also have Truly Madly Guilty on my shelf. Probably will be more of like an early next year read. She is coming out with a new book in September called Here One Moment, and I'm actually just going to read the synopsis because I don't think I could do it justice, and I'm really excited for it. So, aside from a delay, there will be no problems. The flight will be smooth, it will land safely, everyone who gets on the plane will get off, but almost all of them will be forever changed. Because on this ordinary, short, domestic flight, something extraordinary happens. People learn how and when they are going to die. For some, their death is far in the future, age 103, and they laugh, but for 6 passengers, their predicted deaths are not far away at all. How do they know this? There were ostensibly more interesting people in the flight: the bride and groom, the jittery, possibly famous woman, the giant Hemsworth-esque guy who looks like an off-duty superhero, the frazzled, gorgeous flight attendant, but none would become as famous as the Death Lady. Not a single passenger or crew member will later recall noticing her board the plane. She wasn't exceptionally old or young, rude or polite, she wasn't drunk or nervous or pregnant. Her appearance and demeanor were unremarkable, but what she did on that flight was truly remarkable. A few months later, 1 passenger dies exactly as predicted. The 2 more passengers die again, as she said they would. Soon, no one is thinking this is simply an entertaining story at a cocktail party. If you were told you only had a certain amount of time left to live, would you do things differently? Would you try to dodge your destiny? So that one sounds really good. Liane Moriarty is excellent at character stories, so definitely looking forward to reading that one later this year as well. Okay, finally moving on. What was my biggest disappointment this year? I started a series called the Vital Secret series. I have a physical copy of the prequel novella, pretty short. I have also read the first book. This is an indie book. It is pretty highly rated on Goodreads, but has very few ratings. But I forget, I think I picked up like a book in the middle of the series on maybe a Stuff Your Kindle day, but it unfortunately did not live up to the statistics for me. Book plot felt very, very rushed, and I'm not just saying like the novella, the first book as well. It is a historical fiction mystery. The prequel is set during just after World War II. The second book happens closer to the present. The second book, or the really book 1, is very, like, the most insta-love book I have ever read. I don't mind an insta-lust book, but I don't love insta-love, and this, again, was insta-love to the extreme. Like, we were just doing things to move the plot along, not to develop any characters. I may give one more book a chance, because, again, it is fairly highly rated for the few ratings that are on there, and plus I have, I think, the next book on my Kindle anyway, so when it comes up in my TBR, I think I'll give it a chance and then decide if I'm going to abandon the series. I forget exactly how many books it is, maybe 6 or 7, So definitely not a series I want to continue with if it's not vibing with me. On a more positive note, the next question is, what was your biggest surprise? Any of my friends will know this book because I have not stopped gushing about it since I read it in May, and that is Here for the Cake by Jennifer Milliken. That is a new release that I think it came out in May as well. This book was just so good from page one. It is a romance. It follows Paisley and Klein. Paisley and Klein know each other from college. They kind of almost had a thing one night, but they were drunk, it was a little sloppy, didn't really go anywhere. They were in a writing class together and they had to evaluate people's papers anonymously, and Klein ended up getting Paisley's and absolutely tore it apart. And they've basically been enemies ever since. Haven't really crossed paths, but now Paisley's sister is getting married to Paisley's ex, and while Paisley is not jealous or anything, it still is like a really uncomfortable situation to be in. On the bachelorette party, she shows up at a bar with the bride and the other bridesmaids, and Klein happens to be the bartender. During the time, Paisley's ex and soon-to-be brother-in-law gives her a call just to say, hey, it's really cool that you're throwing this bachelorette party for your sister, hope things are cool with us, yada yada, and she wants to vomit basically about all this, and so she quickly says to Klein, like, Klein, quick, pretend you're my boyfriend, and he leans over the phone and says, Paisley baby, get off the phone, I'm done sharing you. And she's like, well, those are now my 10 favorite words in the world. So it goes from there. They now are like committed to this fake dating situation, which I love a good fake dating. And they really develop a friendship again first. They re-find their friendship, then the romance happens. The wedding happens to be on an island, so it's a destination wedding. Also in kind of like a trade deal situation, Paisley owns a PR company and she is helping him market himself so that his first novel might be more likely to be picked up by publishers. But the banter is amazing, the one-liners are amazing, the romance is so sweet. I just loved everything about this. I got the arc just on a whim. I had never heard of this author before, and now I'm going back and I'm reading everything from her because I'm just obsessed. And if anyone reads that and wants to talk about this book, my messages are open because I will gush about this book all day. The next question is, what is your favorite new author, either a debut or a new to you author? So all of these authors are new to me authors. The first one is Jennifer Milliken, who wrote Here for the Cake. As I said, she is now a favorite after reading this one book. I am so excited to read more from her. The next ones might be more surprising. I had not read an Abby Jimenez or an Emily Henry book, and I read Just for the Summer and Funny Story and really enjoyed them both. So those are now new favorites for me, as well as Kristen Ciccarelli. She wrote Heartless Hunter, or Crimson Moth, I believe it's called in some of the other countries, and that was also a 5-star exciting fantasy read for me. Who is your newest fictional crush? I am not a big fictional crush, fictional boyfriend person, but I definitely swooned over Klein in Here for the Cake. I'm going to try not to repeat myself too many times, but there definitely is a few repeats in this video. I also loved Justin in Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Both of these guys are sweethearts. They are people who notice those little details about their significant other and take the time to do something about that. whether it's sending a video that they know they'll like, or picking up like a small gift. Or Justin, for example, he sends out these adorable like date surveys before each of their dates and just develops a really creative date based around the answers. I just love when guys go that extra mile in books. So those are two that definitely I was kicking my feet at. Really good guys. And who is my newest favorite character? Again, we're going back to the strong female women. I read Real by Kennedy Ryan earlier this year. Neva Saint in that is amazing. She is an actress, first on the stage and then gets picked up for her first film. She is strong. She also deals with lupus. And it's pretty debilitating at times, and she is just amazing all the way through it, dealing with that. And as I mentioned, Kennedy Ryan just does such a good job with writing those complex characters, and so she's not perfect, but she is so likable, so amazing, and definitely one of my favorites. And then lastly, just kind of more for fun, I read Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. For those who haven't read it, it's a cozy mystery, and this elderly woman who is a widow and lives alone above a tea shop that she owns called Vera Wang's tea shop, because she's hoping that will draw more people to her tea shop, even though she's Vera Wong. There is a dead body one morning in her tea shop, and she decides that the police do a terrible job of trying to solve the case, so she definitely meddles in it, draws the outline for the dead body, she's looking for clues, she's investigating suspects. She is doing all the things to get in the way of this police investigation, and she has also all this really wonderful life advice, and I just really got a kick out of her. The next question is, what is a book that made you cry? So I already mentioned that The Women definitely was a major tearjerker, and very similarly, All the Light We Cannot See was also a major tearjerker, 5-star read for me. I actually really had a hard time deciding which one was my favorite book of the year so far. This one edged it out just a tiny bit. This is a pretty well-known book. World War II, France, tells the story of Marie Laure, who is a blind teenager, I believe she's a teenager by like when the main plot starts happening, and navigating some of that. We also get the perspective of a soldier and also of kind of the bad guy as well. World War II in general obviously is such a hard and devastating subject, and this book tackled it so well. And what are books that made you happy? Here for the Cake, again, of course. Also, Just for the Summer, again, any of those books that make you kick your feet, so sweet. What are the most beautiful books that you've bought this year? I technically didn't buy this was gifted to me, but this copy of A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross is stunning. I love the colors, I love the water, I just think this is absolutely beautiful. I've read maybe like a quarter of the way through this one, and I'm really liking the story as well, so I'm excited to talk more about this. And then also I recently picked up a copy of Sharkheart. I know this also is one that kind of gets polarizing reviews, either people love it or hate it, but I don't think anyone can deny that this cover is absolutely stunning. And then the last question is, which books do you need to read by the end of the year? So as a TBR reader, I have a lot of books that I, quote, quote, need to read by the end of the year, but some of the ones that are coming up sooner rather than later, or have a reason for me to actually need to read them, is Behind Every Good Man, which I mentioned I have a advanced reader copy for. and I'm just really excited about it. Coming up in my TBR, another Leanne Moriarty. I think I briefly mentioned Big Little Lies. I plan to read soon. This is one of her more well-known books because it also was a big hit with television. I recently realized that a lot of her books have been made into television series, but this again is one of her more well-known ones. And then I'm also excited to finally read Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I picked this up last summer on vacation as kind of what I thought was going to be my first Bookstagram post, and then haven't read it yet, as classic book people do. So I am actually reading this for a book club pick coming up in my local book club, so I'm excited to finally get an excuse to read it. I've heard really good things, talking octopuses. I'm here for it. And then I guess just to throw something a little bit different, I also am definitely going to be reading Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I talked about this in my June new releases. This is definitely a highly anticipated book for a lot of people. This will be my first Riley Sager, but I literally have 3 book clubs that are planning to read this among my online book clubs, so this will definitely get read in the next couple of months, and I'm looking forward to it. But that is my mid-year freakout tag. Let me know in the comments what your favorite book of the year is, and as always, if you are not feeling super chatty, feel free to leave me an emoji. Today you can leave me a sun emoji for summer and this heat wave that we are having, and I will see you on my next video. Bye!